Hey guys, King of Charmanders here. Today I'll be your judge, your jury, and your analyst. And today I bring to you basically 3 teams from the old Kanto Cup that from the previous versions that work for this Kanto Cup. Literally, things haven't changed too much. So one of my friends is like, dude, do you know what things you used from before? Because not everybody has an XL Chansey or an XL Lickitung. If you find yourself in a feedback loop of where you are so anxious that you must spend money, dollar after dollar buying raid passes, then you may have gambling addiction. Well, not really, since it's guaranteed XL candy compared to what it was before. Remember back in the day? Niantic does a great job of making sure you keep coming back, but that's what their marketing scheme is, so you know what? About Niantic. So, what we're going to do here is this is going to be the 3 teams that basically I used and practiced for the previous seasons that did really well for me. So I consistently went positive with them, or they have an effect. They're going to be effective for this cup because, like I mentioned, there are very few changes in this cup. And without further ado, let's get started. Oh, by the way, make sure you contribute to pbook.com. Alright, so for the first team, I have Agrav, and we have, as your lead, you have Awak, and then you have Hypno. You have 2 Alolans and a hypnotic yo-yo. I don't know. Does Hypno kidnap children? I don't know. I forgot what the lore is in the anime. But anyways, we're going to use Agrav here in the lead. Agrav is a top lead because its ability to pressure shields and Stone Edge hits really hard. The matchup against Chansey XL, if you get in the lead with an Alolan Graveler, is kind of painful, but you can win as long as you land a Stone Edge. If you land one Stone Edge, then you can just Rock Blast and Stone Edge accordingly. Alolan Muck will be your safe switch. Poison Jab made Alolan Muck a lot more viable, but in a lot of instances, I find that Snarl can be either just as good or just for the fact that with Snarl, you're able to get to Dark Pulse pretty quickly. You do super effective damage against things like Alolan Marowak, and you have the Sludge Wave option. With Sludge Wave, you pretty much one-shot all the Charmers, and it gives you it does a really good ton of damage even when it's resisted in the mirror. But the ironic thing is if you do get the Alolan Muck mirror, you basically resist each other. So Acid Spray Amok, nothing wrong with it, but you can use Snarl is what I'm trying to say. So you don't have to use the Poison Jab Acid Spray, you can use Snarl Sludge Wave. It's really up to you. Then you have Hypno to close out. Hypno, this is essentially a double safe switch team. Alolan Muck or Hypno both work as safe switches, so it's really just how you want to align and play it out. Amazing coverage, not a lot of bulk. When you put an electrified boulder into this team, basically Agrav is like Machamp. You put it in there, it's squishy, but it's really strong, which is why you have a great not an amazing consistency rating, but a great consistency rating and a pretty good safety. Because like I mentioned, your back row is pretty much 2 safe switches. And they cover a lot of the meta really well. Alolan Graveler can take out Chansey. It does have a hard time against Nidoqueen, which is why you have Amok and Hypno. Another reason why Snarl might not be a bad idea for Amok, Snarl Dark Pulse will give you a lot more play against Nidoqueen versus the Poison Jab version, just because Poison Jab is resisted. Snarl straight Dark Pulse will do really well against Nidoqueen, or you'll force shields, as long as you don't eat an Earth Power or get baited by Poison Fang. So, well, yeah. You can eat Poison Fangs pretty comfortably with an Alolan Muck. And then Hypno closes out. Really solid team. You can break shields, and then Amok can basically Dark Pulse, or Hypno can Shadow Ball things to oblivion. And it has a very low threat score. 607 is pretty low. It's actually on the pretty high side. If you have the high-end Pokemon or the high-end teams, they're usually around, the threat score is usually around 550 or 530. So this is actually, even though 607 is usually low, it's kind of high, but it has great coverage. Your only 2 things that you really have to watch out for are Graveler and Lickitung. You don't want to eat a Power Whip from Lickitung with Alolan Graveler, but you can break shields and force and blast Lickitung with Stone Edge. You can set up farm down plays with Alolan Muck and Hypno, so it's not super bad. Remember, dark types do resist Lick, so you don't do too bad against Lickitung. And if you find a Cantonian Graveler running around Kanto Cup, I don't know what to tell you, but Cantonian Graveler can do well against this line, but you're likely not going to see one, so I wouldn't worry about Cantonian Graveler. Other than that, it's pretty generic how you play this. You lose lead with Alolan Graveler against something like Nidoqueen. You safe switch into Hypno or Alolan Muck, and then you try to close out the match. If you can choose to, like, if you have a neutral matchup, for example, Alolan Graveler doesn't have a great matchup against Snorlax, just because Snorlax has superpower, but you can force shield. So you can break shields with Alolan Graveler, switch out, or just sack Alolan Graveler in the lead, and then sweep with your back row. Alright, next up we have Awak in the lead, Lapras as your safe switch, and Nidoqueen to close out. This does use Nidoqueen as your closer. Nidoqueen was powered up due to the Poison Bite buff, and one of the Mons, along with Chansey XL, that made its incision into the Kanto Cup rankings. Well, Nidoqueen's, yeah, it's basically Nidoqueen is really good now. Well, in hindsight, somewhat, just because with a ton of Hypnos running around, and basically there's a lot of things that can take out Nidoqueen, so even though Nidoqueen is great, it's just that Psychic Presence, or just a lot of things like Lapras, etc., can give Nidoqueen a hard time. So Nidoqueen isn't exactly super safe, but if it has shield, it can set you up for a lot of things thanks to Poison Fang, and Earth Power still does a huge chunk of damage if it lands against something that's super effective. So very solid team. Awak and Lapras are a pretty common core in the Kanto Cup, so you're probably going to see one of the two a lot. I'm not sure about Alolan Marowak though. It's kind of iffy to use Alolan Marowak. It was so strong in the previous versions before Nidoqueen came out, or just like Pidgeot in general, because Pidgeot will effectively wall an Alolan Marowak unless it has Fire Blast. So if you're running Fire Blast Alolan Marowak, you're a madman, and that's actually a pretty dang good idea. But as you see here, this team is very powerful. Amazing coverage, amazing safety, great bulk and consistency, a very solid team. It's just very surprising because, like I mentioned, Alolan Marowak gets walled by Pidgeot. So you see Pidgeot, switch. Nidoqueen does it. Nidoqueen with Poison Fang, Poison Jab can do a huge chunk of damage against Pidgeot, so you can force your way through it. Or what you can do is that eat the Feather Dances, Poison Fang down, and then you can farm down with Lapras and Ice Shard. It's another option you have. But this is a really powerful and a really solid team. Alolan Marowak does beat Chansey pretty freaking hard. You're gonna be clubbing the... You're gonna club this thing to death. But it's just hilarious how it works. So you see Chansey versus Alolan Marowak. Awak has a very solid matchup against it. Except you're going to spend 3 minutes in this... Well, yeah. You're going to spend an entire 3 minutes in this matchup. Literally bone clubbing this poor little egg nurse of doom to oblivion. So it's going to be a very long day for you. Or no, very long match. Hopefully not a long day, because you're not going to bone club a ton of Chansey XLs. If you find more than one, I'm sorry. You're going to be there for a long time, unless they decide to switch out. Oh, wrong team. But as you see here, this team's really powerful, really strong, with Lapras being your only... Lapras versus Awak isn't a super bad matchup. What you can choose to do is you can safe switch into your own Lapras to try to... and hope that they stay, and then just do the Skull Bash mirror match. But Alolan Marowak can do a decent amount of damage with Shadow Bone, especially if you get the debuff. You can sack Alolan Marowak in the lead against Lapras, and then use Nidoqueen, your own Nidoqueen and Lapras to basically power up and farm it down, whichever one you want to do. Lapras is a little rough on this team though. It can give you a hard time, but if they are weak to Lapras and Nidoqueen for their back row, then you could, again, like I mentioned, Alolan Marowak versus Lapras isn't a super bad matchup. If you bring up the sim, as you see here, 480 isn't super bad. That's not bad. Yes, you lose, but again, 4 turns can make a difference. But at the same time, if you look, Lapras doesn't have a lot. Lapras can lose if you get a Shadow Bone through, or if it gets baited, as you see here. If you get a Shadow Bone through and you fall for the double bait, you actually can beat Alolan Marowak. I mean, you can actually lose to Alolan Marowak. So I'm wrong. Play that backwards. You can beat Lapras in the lead, but the reason why it's such an iffy matchup is because you literally have to double bait with Bone Club, which is extremely unlikely. So just keep that in mind. This is a lot of work. You have to get a Shadow Bone through, and you have to get you have to get one Shadow Bone through, and then you have to Bone Club it to death. So just keep that in mind. 9 times out of 10, it really just depends how your opponent plays it, because it's very likely your opponent if your opponent does shield the Shadow Bone, basically you're dead. So it's a very rough matchup. But, like I mentioned, you can sack game back in the lead, come in with your Lapras or Nidoqueen, farm down, and then run through hopefully their back row is weak to Lapras and Nidoqueen. Very low threat score, 580. This is what I mean, like, the threat score is kind of weird because, like, 600 is kind of like the high end, but, like, for other teams or in other metas, usually 600 is on the low end. So, but very solid team, like I mentioned. Uses the Awak Lapras core and is really good for this Kanto Cup. Alright, last but not least, we have Lapras lead, Hypno as your safe switch, and of course the four-armed Mortal Kombat of Doom, Goro, or Machamp. Or, is there another character? I'm pretty sure there's I watch a lot of anime, so I'm pretty sure there's another character with like 4 arms. Or more. I'm pretty sure there is. But I'm just, yeah. Anyways, you have the standard Lapras. Make sure you have Skull Bash just so you can win that mirror with Lapras. Hypno, you can play with its punches, but typically Thunder Punch Shadow Ball is the safe switch combination. Or you can use Focus Blast. You know, Focus Blast can do a ton of damage against a lot of the safe switch meta. So if you hit a Focus Blast and they don't shield, it sucks for them. But also keep in mind with Focus Blast, it also gives you a rough matchup against Alolan Marowak because you don't have balls. So you can't ball out. But Machamp is still very strong in this cup, particularly against Lapras and the normal type meta. So, if you have 4-arm Goro, it's still pretty good. A for coverage, great stats for everything else. Just literally, Lapras and Hypno are so bulky that they make up for the fact that Machamp will tank your rating if you put it in any team. But despite that, it's still very solid. As you see here, very, very powerful. Overall, Lapras is a great lead in this meta. If you use it, it's with Skull Bash plus Surf, it does really well, and you can beat the other water tanks. If you get the mirror match, of course, whoever gets the extra ice shards or wins CMP will take that matchup. So just be wary of the Lapras mirror match in the lead. You don't lose the lead against Pidgeot and against Lapras in the 2 shield. So this is just this is reflectant of the 1 shield. You do lose against Alolan Raichu, so be a little careful about electric types, or if you have someone in Alolan Graveler. Can be a rough matchup for you, so just keep that in mind. But it's very powerful. As you see here, Lapras is very solid. Again, you do beat Pidgeot. I don't know why you see Ninetales heal. Ninetales in the 2 shield against Lapras isn't too bad of a matchup. As you see, Ninetales does win, but you have to shield both Surfs and you have to overheat. And you're left with 8 HP, so it's not that bad. So don't really worry about it too much. Low threat score 596. Again, 600 would be on the low end for a lot of other metas, but it's kind of on the high end. This one's still very solid. Sadly, that's not like 569, which, you know, that would be a great back row of a number. But this is a really solid team. Back in the day, I used this one as well, and I've practiced with all 3 of these teams, and they've done really well. This one's pretty generic, but Lapras, Hypno, and Machamp is solid. Just be careful of Rock Slide, though, just because if you try to Rock Slide in Alolan Marowak, if it's Shadow, you might KO it, but Alolan Marowak, just because it has a decent amount of bulk, it will actually live, so just be very careful. And that's GG's. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully these teams do help you out. Kanto Cup is coming pretty soon, and like I mentioned, old school teams still work, so hopefully if you used one of these teams in the past, it will encourage you to use them again, because really, either they might be as effective, or if not, more effective, depending on how the meta is shaped, or how well you will get used to it. But like, there really hasn't been too many changes, like I mentioned if you watched my previous videos. So, want to instill that confidence in you that your old teams can still work. Without further ado, I hope you enjoy the Kanto Cup. Hopefully you're going to do well in it, as it is ranked for the first time ever. So, hopefully you do well with it. If you haven't hit Legend yet, or if you've already hit Legend, have a little bit of fun. Really appreciate you guys. Please like and subscribe. You can easily subscribe by using the little box at the bottom right, that sub box. Put your mouse over it, sub pops up. Really appreciate my current subscribers. Good luck on your Go Battle League sets, and I will see you guys on the next video.